Um, Keeping our businesses and the community safe is one of the top priorities of the chamber, and we're working on this on many different fronts. At the same time, helping businesses understand and navigate all of the tax and financial implications of the COVID-19 pandemic is also very important. There have been many government programs introduced, and many of you have hopefully taken advantage of them. Today, we're going to take a look at updates to those programs that are still available, as well as the tax implications, of these programs. And we thank Matt Cekander, CPA with Doring Winders and Company, and Mel Stock, Market President for the Effingham Regional Market for Midland States Bank, for joining us. Before we dig into this topic, we'd like for you to take a minute to use the chat box and let us know whether your company received a Paycheck Protection Program loan. Just use the chat box and put yes or no, please, and we'll give you just a few minutes to do that. Please do that right now.
Yeah, if you mouse over towards the bottom and click on chat, if you don't see it, it should pop open that chat box. I think our guesstimate was a majority of the audience probably did. In case you weren't aware, you're not divulging anything confidential here, because I can click on my PPP database list and find out if you did or not. We're not gonna audit your response in the chat box. Whatever, but
well, so it looks pretty well like everybody has received a loan. So that's good, because we'll be talking a lot about kind of following up on some of those items related to that. So this time, thank you for responding to the chat box. And this time I'm going to introduce the speakers today. Matt Cekander is originally joined Doring Winders and Company in 2006 after beginning his public accounting career in 2001 with a large independent CPA firm in the Chicago area. In 2009, he became the operations director for a regional retail music company, and then rejoined Doring Winders in 2011. Matt became a partner in 2014. He specializes in helping private businesses and individuals with their financial needs and tax planning needs. Matt is an active member of the Presbyterian Church in Effingham, where he teaches the high school class and acts as an elder. He is active in Effingham Sunrise Rotary Club, Pinnacle Forum, Effingham FCA, and the Effingham County Council on Aging. He is the treasurer and board member of the Effingham County Chamber of Commerce. Matt and his wife Amber reside in Effingham with their 2 daughters. Mel Stock leads Midland States Bank's sales and management activities to support growth and development of retail, small business, and commercial programs and services within Effingham, Fayette, Bond, Marion, and Champaign counties. He has served in the financial services industry for nearly 40 years and joined Midland States Bank in 2012. He currently serves on the boards of the Effingham Regional Growth Alliance, Crisis Nursery, committee member for the Effingham County Chamber of Commerce. Matt is active at Sacred Heart Church. He's also active in Sunrise Rotary and volunteers with several civic organizations. Mel and his wife Elaine reside in Effingham County, and they have 3 children. And in his spare time, Mel enjoys the outdoors, hunting and fishing. So as we begin our webinar today, please remember to keep your microphone muted and post questions in the chat box. So welcome, Matt and Mel, and take it away.
Okay, thank you, Norma. A couple of reminders as we were preparing for this yesterday and last week too. Since we put together a few of these slides and questions, there's already been changes. So I guess a disclaimer and public service announcement is this is at the whim of Congress, of the General Assembly, of the President. There's changes being updated. In fact, the SBA.gov, so the Small Business Administration, which is where a lot of these the COVID relief programs are coming from, SBA, we use that acronym regularly today. They've now dated their frequently asked questions up in the upper left-hand corner because it's changing multiple times throughout a week even. And when I was looking at it last, there was 52. There's over 52 questions, of frequently asked questions, just on the PPP, the Paycheck Protection Program, for instance. So one thing is, while we're going to plan and go over some things the best we can. There's going to be changes made. And it's like anything else in business, especially when it becomes as critical as cash flow, surviving COVID crisis that seems to be hitting Effingham County a little harder recently. Seek the counsel of many, whether it be your accountant, your banker, your attorney, if it goes to the legal issues, someone in HR. Just ask a lot of questions. I love asking questions. I'm going to encourage you to keep doing that because it really will change a couple times a week. For instance, we just learned a special rule on what counts towards the forgiveness of the PPP on self-rentals. And a lot of privately held companies have their own businesses renting from a separate company that they own, a separate real estate entity that they own. A new rule just came out on that earlier this week. So depending on your specific situation, watch for those things and walk, I guess, as closely as you can, asking questions of the accountant or the banker, and anybody else that you respect, other business owners too. Anything else on that, Mel? Same thing change on the banking world?
No, I think you said it very well, Matt. This whole process has remained very, very fluid. And it's one of those things, I guess, keep in mind, the bankers and the accountants didn't make the rules. We're just trying to carry them out. So, and that's a challenge because the way they rolled this thing out, it's a very vague wording, different interpretation. So it's been a challenge on everyone's end. And just like you said, seek the advice of many and do your best on it. That's, we'll just have to work through it. So.
Okay. Sounds good. Yeah, and if you put yourself in their shoes, I'm sure it's not easy trying to roll out a couple $1 trillion worth of programs and how you're going to allocate that among healthcare, among the private entities. So I'm not saying anything bad about it. They're just constantly addressing what I will call unintended consequences that probably the bankers and the accountants are bringing up. That's probably what it is at this point. Okay. The chat box, as Norma said, I've got it open on my screen. I believe Norma and Mel have it on their side too. If there's questions as we're going, throw them in there. If we don't get to them on the fly, I kept my schedule open until 10:30. This goes until 9:45 to 10, somewhere in there. We'll have time for Q&A at the end. But if the question is fresh, just type it in that chat box so we can circle back to it or at least acknowledge it. Either to me privately or Mel or to everybody too. Okay, what options are available? The first slide here. Well, we've talked about the PPP, an SBA program. There's also an EIDL, Economic Impact Disaster Loan. Those are the ones. One was a loan and one is an advance. So there's been some confusion on which one do you have to pay back, which one do you not. The advance is done. The loan still exists. We're going to get to that in a minute. That's number 3. Mel's going to take that part. But there's the EIDL. You'll also hear it referred to as the EIDL. Did you get the EIDL? You can get PPP and the EIDL, the EIDL. Those are compatible. SBA ruled on that. Initially, they said you can't do both. Now they said that was fine if you did that. The PPP application is currently closed, as is the EIDL advance, but the EIDL loan is still open. Illinois has a downstate operating grant. I'm mentioning those are still available. Be careful. From my standpoint, what I've observed, they're not as practical and as expedient as the SBA and the federal programs, as you might expect. Illinois isn't quite cash flush at this point, so they're very they want to know, as they should, that you really qualify, and they want things to run through proper channels, so they take a little longer. They also want sound bites, success stories. So know that if you do those, you're going to be in those for a pretty long haul. But those are available the downstate grants from Illinois. The 941 credits. If you did not get a PPP, it looks like most everybody did from the chat box. If you didn't, there's an employee retention credit that you can take advantage of. It might be 60 to 70% of what you could have qualified for under the PPP monies, but if you got the PPP, that won't apply. So unless someone chats me and says, we didn't get the PPP, what can I get that employee retention credit? We're not going to spend any time on that one. The payroll tax deferment is the last one. This one is also available if you didn't get the PPP money, but a new version of this came out with the recent executive order that the president signed. Actually goes into play September 1st. So you would think we would have all kinds of information for you on this, and we really don't, because nothing's been clarified on who pays for the deferment of it's the employee's Social Security 6.2%. So if you don't pay that for the employee now, who pays that later? Those questions aren't answered. Employers aren't jumping on this thing to start covering that at their own expense if it's not going to be credited. So it's a 4-month period, September 1st through 12/31. Just write down, maybe as a tip, to check into that payroll tax deferment, how that's going to roll out, because sometime in the next week or so, I'm anticipating answers to come, since it's going to be coming to play next week. Wish I had more on that. I'd like to know for our own business here too, but that's just the nature of what we're dealing with. Options available. Any other options available, Mel or Norma, that you can think of that you want to go over? Does that cover it?
We're not going to cover that for small businesses. The downstate small business stabilization grant is still available. You would have to check with the city or your local unit of government if you're not in the city of Effingham.
Okay.
Or the county, Effingham County. Those are, if you're in Topless or Altamont or another community, you would need to go to your village board, or whoever for that to find out more about that.
Well, and there's some on that's a great point. I'll give a plug to the county, effinghamcountychamber.com. If you go to effinghamcountychamber.com, if you're following along on a second screen or something, under community resources and other COVID resources, Norma and her team does a great job of updating those for a lot of what we're talking about today. So keep that, just bookmark that page. If you just find the home page and click on the COVID, it's in the green box, you'll get it there. The second item here on the slide is just the proactive communications. That goes back to asking as many questions as you can. Who do I need to be seeking the help of to make sure we're implementing these? So if you've got someone processing your payroll, make sure you're walking in step with them to say, hey, I've got an employee that has COVID. What do I do for this quarantine period? How can I be reimbursed for that? If you're under 500 employees, there's a reimbursement program that exists for that covers 10 days of out wages, up to 80 hours. A lot of businesses still aren't aware of that. But if you're paying, even if they quarantine themselves because they have symptoms and they're diagnosing, getting a medical diagnosis, you can pay them and get reimbursed on your third quarter 941, your payroll tax return. But if someone else is doing your payroll, you have to let them know that these are COVID wages for that quarantine period. So write that one down and make sure that your HR or somebody knows about, is aware that you get those that you get that credit on your payroll tax return. Those will be due October 31st of 2020, so it'll be up pretty quickly. And with as hard as Effingham's been hit lately, I would guess over half of the people on this call would qualify for some of those COVID credits on the payroll paid. It's their payroll, and it's also their payroll taxes or FICA, so you can get them reimbursed. So proactive communications with whoever your team is on doing the payroll, your accounting side, and your banking. Then I'm going to let Mel take the SBA and EIDL loans update, where that currently stands.
Sure, thanks, Matt. Just real quick, there is plenty of funding available for businesses to get loans, the EIDL loans. Of course, that is a loan direct through SBA. There's no bank involvement on any of those. Rates on them are fairly attractive, 3.75 for a profit business, or 2.75 if you're a nonprofit. It's a 30-year loan, so you get pretty low repayment on that thing. There's no personal guarantees on anything under $200,000, and it's an unsecured loan on anything under $25,000. So SBA, they'll go in and do their, typical underwriting. They'll run a credit bureau through Experian. Larger loans, they may run a D&B report. There's really no set minimum score, but it has to be acceptable in SBA's eyes. So there's really no definition on what's acceptable in their eyes, but that's the way they've got it termed at this point. So also on those, they do defer payments for the first year, but interest does continue to accrue even though it's in the deferral period. And the actual loan amount, it's not an amount that you go in and plug and say, hey, I want 50,000. SBA determines the loan amount based on the information that you input. And what they're asking for basically is, information pre and basically post-COVID on how much financial deterioration your business suffered. So that's how they determine the loan amount. So, and it is for working capital only. Rates are pretty good, but unfortunately you can't go out and refinance existing debt. It's only for working capital purposes. So, according to the website, it has an expiration date of September 30. Now, obviously, as fluid as what everything has been, that could easily change as well. So just kind of have to, if you're interested in getting an EIDL loan, it's just one of those things you kind of have to keep an eye on it. If you do want to get one, make sure you don't miss the deadline, assuming they don't extend it out. So just for reference purposes, I noticed, I think as of just the other day, August 24th, just in Illinois, there's been roughly 140,000 EIDL loans granted for about 6.8 billion. So quite a bit of activity. Actually, I'm surprised it wasn't higher than that.
Yeah.
But I know a lot of people went, just straight PPP route that with an option to get it forgiven, whereas this EIDL loan, it's a straight loan. You got to repay it. So that's kind of the long and the short on the EIDL part of it. So.
Okay. Yeah, no, it's interesting on the personal guarantees under the 200,000. Is that what you said?
Yes, no personal guarantee on anything under 200,000.
Yeah, like anything, watch the fine print on those, since it is the loan. And I guess they seek their banker on that, SBA.gov, or how you recommend they apply if they're going to by September 30th.
Straight to SBA.gov.
Yeah.
Bank is not involved in these in any fashion, so it's straight through the government.
Okay. Yeah, and last time I checked too, there was a lot of funding still under that program, so I wouldn't be surprised. Yeah, kind of like the PPP kept getting extended on that application. I imagine this one probably will as well, but that's one of your options still open.
Yeah. But no, good point on, yes, read the fine print, make sure you know what you're getting into.
Right. Okay, on the let's go to the next slide on the PPP forgiveness. A lot of these are coming up now. So what we're going, and as a reminder, if you had any questions on the previous slide, I wanted to catch up, just chat something to us in the chat box. On the PPP forgiveness, the 8 weeks versus 24 weeks. So what we've been doing is we've been helping some clients with these and talking with other business owners, what's tripping them up or people that are filling these out. There's been some confusion on the 8 week versus 24 week period and anything in between. So on the 8 weeks was the original forgiveness amount. So anything from 8 weeks from when you first, when the money hits your account, the PPP fund. So let's say that was April 15th. That date plus 8 weeks was the forgivable period. The extension to 24 weeks added another 16 weeks. It didn't add another 24 weeks. It went from 8 to 24 total. So now you effectively get, I'm just going to round, but April 15th, let's say they hit your funds. October 15th is the roughly that 24-week period, right? 26 weeks in a year. So I'm just taking half of it. So somewhere in October is when that closes. Now, there was a frequently asked question on SBA.gov, who works with in the U.S. Department of Treasury, that said, what if I've got a loan for $50,000 and I'm already at $70,000. I'm at week 10 or week 11. Can I apply for the forgiveness? And they were clear that you can do that. You still need to provide all that supporting documentation, but the 24, you don't have to wait until the 24 weeks is up before you apply, but you want to make sure you've exhausted as much as you can on payroll to get it to count. Does that make sense? It's harder for me to do these online presentations because I like for the nonverbal feedback. But once you're done, once you believe you're done and you're maxed out on your payroll piece, unless there's something else going on, you don't want to rush that process and only go 8 weeks, because let's say something didn't count towards payroll. We'll get to what counts in a minute. That way it gives you a little bit of grace. And if I were you, I would rather have showing more dollars counting towards it. And then if some of them didn't count for whatever reason, I'm still well covered on the forgiveness piece of payroll. So that's one of the strategies that we've been advising, not to rush the process. But now we get into number 5 and number 6 here on the slide. What about the impact on taxes? This is where I'd love to see the show of hands. I can't do this live, but how many people think the PPP forgiveness is taxable? I'll just take a second. Does anyone think that PPP forgiveness is taxable? All right. Christine says yes. You know, I'm gonna see if does anyone want to put no? Does anyone want to put semantics? I'll accept semantics, because the PPP forgiveness itself is not taxable, but then what happens is the wages therefore aren't deductible. So in a roundabout way, whatever you've got forgiven on the PPP forgiveness, it is taxable because you don't get to then deduct the wages. It would be double dipping. So although there were some people that were trying to get this fixed and say, not only should you be able to get this forgiveness, but the wages should still be deductible. As of now, Congress hasn't fixed that. They kind of shut the door on that. There was a proposal out there. They said, no, you don't get to deduct your wages and get the forgiveness. So be very careful if you're looking at your bottom line year to date, and we're 8 months into the year, and you're thinking, okay, I'm having a break-even year. If you've got PPP forgiveness coming, all of a sudden, whatever that dollar amount is going to go to your bottom line and become a taxable item. So just be prepared for that. Just talking recently with a client that thought they were around break even, and it was close to about 40 grand, about $40,000. Like, well, be prepared for about 10 to 15 grand of a tax hit, because you won't get to deduct those wages. Okay, so just be careful on that. And good job, Chris. You're correct. It ultimately is taxed. It's Congress. So when they said 600 billion was going to be for the PPP, they knew they were getting 150 billion back or so in taxes in lieu of not being able to deduct the wages. I think that number was pretty good. I think it's about what they were projecting, was 600 billion under the PPP program. The other thing I want you to think about with your taxes, as we're going into the end of the third quarter and into fourth quarter on tax planning, for the SBA, they have said that they will have this forgiven. They get up to 90 days on the forgiveness part of it. So that's going to run through the banks, and Mel can talk about that here in a minute. But if you don't know, if you fast forward 90 days today, we're around Thanksgiving time. Right now starts to be a good time to be looking into these applications, in my opinion, if you just want to know how much forgiveness. Why? Because you have 90 days before that response. So let's say your funds aren't forgiven until you wait until November to fill this thing out, and you don't hear till February. Well, then did you create a tax issue in 2021? And you may want that if you're having a fantastic 2020 and you want to defer that income. But just keep in mind that whenever you fill out the application for the forgiveness piece, fast forward up to 90 days, and that might be how long it takes before it's forgiven. And Mel, have you heard anything different with that, with SBA, or?
No, that's correct. They've got 90 days to reply from the time that the bank submits it into the SBA portal. So I guess you could also keep in mind, I believe according to the rules, the bank has 60 days to review after we get the application from the borrower. Now, obviously, I don't think any bank wants to sit on it that long. We'll get processed as quick as possible and get the process, or keep it moving. So yeah, it's one of those things. It's like you referenced before. Work with your accountant and the banker to determine what the best time to get the process moving.
Yeah, and that's one of the things. So Mel, are you saying that it could be 60 days before the bank acts on it, and then plus 90, or 90 days from the date the applicant applies?
From the time the bank receives it, they've got, according to the rules, 60 days to review it. And then after it gets submitted into the SBA portal, SBA has 90 days to act on it. So.
Okay. So again, bottom line planning point is, if you're wanting to get it in and know that answer for sure, be thinking to apply, just as number 7 says there, here early September, somewhere in this time frame. But again, no guarantees what will happen with it. Now this could change too, because they've mentioned, well, if the wages don't match when you had them forgiven, very advanced tax concept, do you throw yourself in a situation where the wages aren't deductible and you got the income included in 2021? And I don't think that's going to happen. That would benefit the IRS. That would be IRS double dipping against taxpayers. I'm not saying that couldn't happen, because I've seen it happen before, but just be careful. And I see some good questions here in the chat box. I'm gonna take a moment. Yeah, Joyce asks if you'll have a worse 2021, should you wait to file for the forgiveness? Yeah, if you think you'll be down a tax bracket or something like that, I mean, if you're a C Corp, you're going to pay a flat 21% anyway, right? That rate's not changing, at least. Well, this is an election year. Right now, 21% for C Corps is good at the federal level until 2025. So if it's an S Corp or a flow through, yeah, I mean, if you're going to have less money passing through to the shareholders, then in 2021, you might want to take that income in 2021 instead. But that's what Congress is working out. What do we do about those wages? Do we still let people deduct those in 2020? I believe they will. I can't imagine it would be a double dip scenario for IRS on that. So that's a great question to ask your accountant. What I'm doing is saying, how much better, where are you at in your taxable income? And let's see what chances we want to take. Also know that Illinois is looking on the election to pass the 8 tax bracket tax, what I like to call it, because they want to go from a singular 4.95% individual to 8 different tax brackets, which I don't care what side of the aisle you vote on. I am not for complicating the tax code system. So you can guess how I'm probably going to vote on that one. But anyway, and I'm probably not even supposed to say that. I'm sure Norm is cringing, but I don't think it's business favorable. And the chamber exists to strengthen member businesses. So I don't think it strengthens member businesses to go to 8 tax brackets in Illinois. Okay, I'm done with that part. Okay, but as far as the forgiveness in which tax rate, though, it might be a situation where you want to plan to take it in 2021 then. But that would be a great question to talk with the accountants. And then yes, go ahead, Mel.
I might add one other thing. I believe that actually the customer has from the 10 months after their usage period ends to apply for the forgiveness. So there again, that's kind of goes back to, sit down with your accountant and determine, what's going to work best on what year it'll fall into. So
right,
it's going to be a long drug out process before all this ends. So.
Well, and some people had some changes in their payroll expense and they want to wait out that 24-week period, and it's going to push it up to the deadline, to the end of calendar year anyway. So it's going to be, my guess is there will be a form specific to the forgiveness or a schedule or something on the with the IRS. I think it's probably what will happen.
Mm-hmm.
But we'll see. Notice another question on 3508. We'll cover that in a minute. Anything else from the forgiveness part of this? Someone's got a question, type it in the chat box. Otherwise, ready to move on. Okay. The next one, the next slide, then what about, which someone was asking about this, the 3508. There's there's a couple different forms, and I'm going to let Mel talk about the 2 different forms with SBA.
Yeah, the EZ form, I think for the most part, most companies will be able to use the EZ form. And the manner in which you determine whether you can get to use the easy form, or I guess what I would call the full form, there are 3 questions on the easy instructions, and they're in, I mean, you can go out, Norma's got it uploaded on the chamber website, or you can go to sba.gov and get it as well. But there are 3 questions on the easy instructions, and you have to be able to answer yes to at least one of those in order to use the easy form. Now, when you read through those, I'd caution you, read them carefully, because they have them worded negatively. So to me, it's backwards, but it is what it is. That's the way they've got it laid out. So as long as you can answer yes to at least one of those, then you can use the easy application. If by chance, if you can't, then you have to use the long form, and it's got Schedule A and a worksheet attached to it, which the banks will need that completed and submitted along with the long form as well. So, outside of going through the form, which obviously we don't want to this morning, but the easy form, it's fairly self-explanatory. Get your numbers together and fill out the form. Everything I've gotten in so far has been through the easy form, and it's worked okay for the customers. Of course, we don't have the reply back yet from SBA, but certainly not anticipating any issues on that. So.
Right. Well, the 3508 EZ form on the resource page for the chamber, it says it's under Paycheck Protection Program. Once you click on COVID, it's about the 6th or 7th bullet point, PPP loan forgiveness short form. It's got 8 lines on it versus the long form has 11 lines, but the long form 11 lines, as Mel said, is accompanied by a series of worksheets, employee information and details that you need to fill out. One of the quickest ones, if you know people that are self-employed or sole proprietor or something like that, no employees, that's one of the first questions. They can use that easy form. If you didn't, just generally speaking, if you didn't decrease anybody's wages, you kept them on board, you haven't, and everyone, you still have the same full-time equivalent count at the time you apply for forgiveness that you did back in January through January and February, then you can also apply for that 3508 EZ. It's a lot easier to complete. So in the name of the program, one thing I like about the PPP is that I think it did what it was supposed to. It's the Paycheck Protection Program. They just wanted you to protect still paying employees. And as long as you did that, they've put in my opinion, pretty good rules to make sure it was going to get forgiven for those dollar amounts. It's when you started reducing those by more than 25%, head count by more than 25%, that you have to start going to the full version and calculate, okay, how much do I get forgiven for the payroll? And then as you probably aware, the non-payroll items, which are covered utilities, rent, and or interest expense what was the third thing? The payroll, the rent, or you may have the utilities. And that rent thing, that what I was just talking about earlier, was if it's a self-rent, you couldn't pay yourself, the next 10 months of rent to pump up that number too much. So just know there's been some new rules about self-rental expense that qualifies if you're going that route. And to go back to the gross wages that count, we're getting a lot of questions on number 9. What counts as the gross wages? And very specifically, I'm out here looking at the SBA.gov, and also if you look at the instructions, I'm just reading verbatim from the PPP loan forgiveness here. It's the gross wages paid. It means gross wages paid to the employee. So yes, it includes the employee FICA amounts. I get that question. We also hear, what about the state unemployment rates? Yes, because the employee doesn't pay that, the employer does, but it counts. So the state unemployment, any federal unemployment, which is pretty small amount usually in Illinois, because our state unemployment rate, you pay most of it through that. And then also health insurance and dental, you get to include that too. So there's a spot when you apply for forgiveness, it's going to ask for the payroll records for the period that you're requesting forgiveness. So what we recommend is a payroll summary. If you're taking some notes here, a payroll summary for the period. Let's say you're doing it through today, you'd run it through and you got your loan on April 30th. So you do April 30th through August 27th and do a payroll summary by employee. And then you'd also attach maybe whatever you're paying for health insurance for those employees as a separate attachment. It's a payroll related item. And then you come up with the total of those two things, and that's what you put for total wages paid. Now, if you have employees making more than $100,000, you have to put the subtraction in there and not count those towards your applied forgiveness amount. But bottom line is on that number 9, the takeaway there is don't forget that you get to count those employee benefit items that you were paying beforehand. As long as you had the health insurance already in play. There's a rule that said you couldn't start offering health insurance March 15th, but I don't know anybody that was looking to add expenses at that point. So, or I guess if you're a business just starting up, it wouldn't apply. But those amounts before get to be included in payroll costs. There was something else, Mel, that you made me think of on the 35. Was there something with the 3508? On the long version of that, there's a section for owner employees and just regular employees too. So make sure you separate those out. They've made a lot of question answers and specific references on the owner employees. So just be careful that you're putting those down properly on the form. The bright line still seems to be $2 million, and over is going to get extra scrutiny. Under $2 million of PPP money and under, less scrutiny. Under $150,000, probably even less scrutiny. Those are the dollar amounts that SBA is throwing out right now on, if you're just kind of wondering how much do they care about how much I'll receive. That's what they're putting in their Q&As anyway. So just FYI, if you, depending on your PPP level of amount, just to know what you're doing. Regardless, do the right thing and follow it the best you can. I love in the CARES Act, they actually put, if the person operated in good faith that they thought they would be COVID impacted, even if it was down the line, they can apply. I love that because none of us had crystal balls. In the part, if you had a loan under 2 million, they just said, okay, if you had the good faith that you thought you'd be impacted with it, because, I don't know anybody on here. I guess you can chat me if you think we didn't think we were going to be affected by COVID. Go ahead and put that if you want, but I haven't met anybody that said that yet. Not even CPA firms, right? Our taxes got prolonged. We haven't seen as much rate increase. We're not going to be able to do that. Some businesses are just barely surviving with cash flow right now. So we've certainly been impacted. By the way, I counted up my hours. I'm between 150 to 200 hours on PPP time since March 16th. So if that gives you any idea into the world of a CPA, it's good because you're on the front lines with it, but it's come at a price. We'll put it that way. And the time that is, I think it's helping the community locally. So I enjoy doing it. Okay. That's another question. Oh no, Norma's got in there just a reminder. The chamber resource page, that's that Paycheck Protection Program in light gray, and there's about, I don't know, a dozen or so bullets of different tips and frequently asked questions. So pay attention to those whenever you're applying for it. Yeah, go ahead. Do you have anything else to add on that, Mel?
No, I think you covered everything pretty well. On the dollar limits, on the scrutiny level, anything over 2 million, that kind of thing will obviously probably catch the attention of SBA more. On the EZ form versus the long form, really, there's no dollar limitation relative to which form can be used. I think they could have a, $2, $3, $5 million loan and still be able to use the EZ form. Key will be documentation supporting everything on, backing up the forgiveness, what you're asking for, that kind of thing. And then, of course, SBA, I think you're supposed to keep that information, I believe, for 6 years. So keep that in mind as well, whether you keep it electronically or a hard paper copy. If you think you might be subject to an audit, good documentation will be the key, and keep it.
Yeah, I'd keep it at least the 7 years, or if you're looking at the loan, which is kind of number 10 here, and I'll and Mel, I'll let you go over that a little bit, but that you keep it the life of the loan plus 7 years is what we've been advising.
Okay.
And that's the, you want to go over the, what happens to the remaining amount, not hold on, let me answer one more question about the 3508 versus 3508 EZ. The items that qualify for forgiveness are still done the same. So it's not a matter of, does this qualify or not? You know, so if you're taking covered utilities and internet, which applies, we get that question a lot, as long as you had it before that in January and February, you can still, it does the EZ application versus the full-blown full version of it, they still have the same items that are forgivable. It's just the amount of questions and worksheets that you have to complete. You get to the same answer, it's just the length of the form is shortened. It's kind of like the text, the 1040, they used to have an EZ. You get to the same answer, it was just on half a page instead of 2 pages. So, but the same deductibility on items. But for Mel, for the items that are not forgiven, the terms of those, do you want to cover that?
Yeah, I'm sure everybody's probably heard this, but initially it was set up for any part that wasn't going to be forgiven would be repaid based on a 2-year period. Well, they changed that, and now it's a 5-year period. Now, the interest rate on that still accrues at 1%, but you've got a lot longer repayment period to pay it back. So now the only thing on that I would caution people, whenever you took the note out, most notes were based on the original loan amount. So just as an example, if you had a $100,000 loan and you got 75,000 of it forgiven, so you've got 25,000 that's your obligation to repay. Well, whenever those payments kick in, that payment amount's probably based on the 100,000 for the terms of the note. So just keep that in mind. If you do have some that's, that has to be repaid, your payment amount, whenever it starts in, will be based on the original loan amount. So, the banks are going to work with you, get that reduced down to take into account the part that's forgiven, the principal payment that went against the loan, the part that we got back from SBA. So, hopefully with this extension to 24 weeks, I think most businesses will be able to get most of the debt forgiven, which is obviously what we want to work towards. So,
right. Yeah, there'll be some that have been just from staffing, trying to figure out staffing levels, not quite, but I imagine 80% plus is going to be forgiven. I'm probably not supposed to say that, but I imagine most of it, a majority is going to be forgiven on these. And by the way, that seems to be Congress's intent with it and with everything that the country and here locally has been through. So, okay, good. Any other questions related to the forgiveness or the loan piece or the application specifically? Okay, there's been some, the question has come up too, by the way, does, if you receive other federal funds and this pushes you over $750,000, PPP doesn't count towards that, but they did do some other medical relief programs that could push you over that. So just in case there's someone watching who hadn't thought about, wow, these are federal dollars we're expending, am I going to have to be audited by the federal government? And only insofar as it relates to SBA scrutinizing your loan, not with the PPP monies. But some of those other medical relief programs, those dollars do count towards. And if you don't know what I'm talking about, that's fine because it probably means you don't operate in that space. But on the federal dollars, once you expend more than $750,000 of federal dollars, you have what's called a single audit. So if you've got a really large medical part or payment or something like that, it could kick in there. But they're probably very narrow scope to most of the audience today. Okay, what other questions anybody have? We're at 9:45. We've got some items. Should we just interject with questions, anybody? Okay, I'm seeing one question for about the grant money on that EIDL and the PPP forgiveness. There is a spot on, one thing to be careful of, whenever you go to do the forgiveness application, know that if you were one of the first to jump on board and do that forgiveness to do the PPP application back in early April, that form changed, I don't know what, 3, 4, 5 different times, Mel.
Yes.
Well, it seemed like it kept changing. So now people are saying, what do I put for number of employees when I applied? And I said, well, what did you put? Did you have, 50 in there? And it said number of jobs before. And then, so I think they changed number of jobs. That was confusing the construction contractors, and they were putting in jobs instead of employees. So they changed jobs to meaning employees. And then they changed the check boxes up at the top. I don't know how many times that thing changed. Initially, it just said like individual, corporation, nonprofit, or other, or something like that. And then it became like 8 or 9 different check boxes. So just try to match that up the best that you can. But to the question here that came in about the EIDL and the PPP forgiveness, on the one, not the loan, and we're not talking about the EIDL loan that we mentioned earlier on the first slide, but the grants and the advance, those are compatible. So you can count both of those towards forgiveness. It shouldn't impact it. There's a spot on the forgiveness application, though. It says what was the EIDL advance amount that you got with the PPP loans. So you put that together on the application form. But it shouldn't impact your forgiveness unless you're not. I guess if you're not going to be fully forgiven with it anyway, you get to count those together, but it's not going to count against you that you got EIDL money. Initially, they said that you wouldn't get that forgiven on PPP money. They changed that. So hopefully that answers that question. And if not, just chat me back privately or put it out here. What other questions we got? Do the funds, did you say that if you got the PPP loan, you won't be able to use the payroll tax deferment? That's on the, I guess I would need a clarification on that one. Are you referring to the executive order payroll tax deferment that goes into play on September 1st through 12/31? Or are you talking about the early payroll tax holiday? The early payroll tax holiday, and the employee retention credits, you can't do those if you got the PPP money. The new executive order that's coming out changes it, and anything September 1st through 12/31, however it gets enacted, those amounts, that's separate from PPP. So that's okay if you got PPP and you take advantage of that. But the issue, okay, so the executive order, thank you for the clarification. That is, right now it's worded that yes, you could have got PPP and get that 6.2% of the employee piece of Social Security to defer that. Again, I don't know what happens. Right now it's listed that it gets paid back at the beginning of 2021. Well, you may, if you've got 100 employees and you're paying them, you're withholding that 6.2% of their wage, and you just choose not to pay that to the government. Well, what point is, and the employee's net check, I guess, goes up. Might go up a couple $100, $300 a pay period or something on a median wage of 50,000 if you're on a biweekly payroll. I'm just to give an example here. Say you're at someone 50,000, it'd probably be, I don't know, $200-300 a month or something might be what it puts back in their pocket. The question becomes, okay, that $300 times 4, $1,200 times 100 employees, who pays that all that money back? That's 120 grand that's all of a sudden due in January of 2021. Do the employees pay that back because it was deferred? It's not very appealing to me because of the cash flow planning nature of it. And without them saying what we've decided to do is unless the government says they're going to forgive it or split the difference or something like that, I mean, I personally am not advising for creating a cash flow issue at the front of the year when you don't know what 2021 is going to hold and you don't know what your taxes are going to hold. That's just me personally, though. So hopefully that answers that question. Yes, the payroll tax deferment of this executive order is an option if you got the PPP. Sure. Good question. There's mention that if a business has less than 500 employees, Yeah, this is one of the, it's the, yeah, thank you for the question, Austin. That's correct. Write this one down if you're not aware of it. But those, the COVID credits, and this is one of the items for, it was a frequently asked question, how do I claim the COVID credits for somebody on quarantine? It was in the Families First Coronavirus Response Act, so FFCRA, if you want to write that down. I'm just reading it so I make sure I say it properly, since we've got a lot of people on here. Up to 2 weeks, so up to 80 hours of whatever they're normally paid to all employees. The act provides covered employers. So if you've got, and this goes all the way up to the 500 employees, employers must provide to all employees up to 2 weeks or up to 80 hours of paid sick leave at the employee. Let me just, I'm going to see if I can put this in the URL so everyone has this too. There, hopefully, did that link come through okay?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. I'm reading for the first bullet point there. But if the employee is unable to work because the employee is quarantined, and or, I love this, and or, which of course just means or, why put the and, or experiencing COVID-19 symptoms and seeking medical diagnosis. So even if they're quarantined, self-quarantined, they don't get the test results. It takes a week. Then I've had some employers say, oh, then I can't get reimbursed for that. No, according to this and the way that I read it, and most practitioners or professionals seem to agree, is that counted. Even though they were negative and they were still taking those precautions or had the symptoms, up to 80 hours between now and the end of the year, you can take that as a credit per employee. So that ends up being a nice dollar amount there for, for every employee that has that option, because I know a lot of businesses are being hit right now pretty hard with people being out. So a lot of people wearing multiple hats right now, trying to make things work out in their businesses because they're shorthanded with staff. So I guess if there's a small token of appreciation from the government, here it is. They're going to pay you up to 2 weeks. You take it on the your third quarter 941 being that payroll tax form. So, and I might have a frequently asked question for how to claim the credits. I might throw that in here too. How does you can save this too. See, look at us return on your investment for being here this morning. Kinds of URLs. Straight from the Department of Labor and IRS. So it's not. I'm not making up this stuff. I might be speaking in error, but at least you're getting it from the authoritative sites here. But this will tell you, if you copy that second link, then it's item number 37, which by the way tells you how many frequently questions IRS is just getting on this, to pick it up on your 941 and effectively get those dollars reimbursed. So I want to make sure all of you are doing that though. That's the one where make sure the person in HR, the person doing the payroll, understands all of that. Okay, I'm going to see if we've got some other questions. Mel, do you see any questions there you want to jump in on? I know we're.
Yeah, there's one more just popped up.
Okay. So we've been paying COVID wages on the health workers specifically. It's a great question. I don't know the answer to that top of the head. I'll have to look into that. I'll make a note of that question. We'll keep going on that one. We'll come back to you. Okay. And Norma, you have the contact information for these individuals, correct? So we need to get back to them.
Yes.
Hey, man, if I could back up to the other question relative to the EIDL grant funds. So if a business received up to $10,000 of the grant, and I'm not talking the EIDL loan, but a grant,
right?
Does that 10,000 go against them for the PPP forgiveness, or how is that handled?
It has to be included on the application for the forgiveness for the dollar amount. So on the like if you're looking at, I'm just going to the 35. I'll go to 3508. There's a spot for the PPP loan amount, and then underneath that, about 2 items down, I'm looking at the EZ. It's on that link. It's about that again, so that 6th or 7th item down, the PPP loan forgiveness short form on the chamber website, that idle advance amount, that needs to be put on there too. So yes, if you received let's say you received 50,000 of PPP forgiveness and 10,000 of the idle advance amount, you need to come up with support showing $60,000 or potentially 10,000 won't be forgiven.
Okay.
But you don't. Initially, you had to pay back the 10,000 for the wages. You weren't supposed to get both of those. It said that you agreed not to apply for any other SBA programs, and then they changed that and said, okay, you can do that, but it had to be for COVID-related reasons. So, and that advance, by the way, was a little more generous on what kind of COVID items it could cover. The protective gear, the cleaning supplies. They used some examples of it encompassing more than that, but they're not. But they're compatible, so you can still get both of them forgiven. You don't have to pay those back.
Okay.
As long as they use them for COVID purposes.
Well, we're running up on the 10 o'clock hour, so thank you, Matt and Mel, for great information, for all the questions. Again, reminder just to always go to that COVID-19 resource page on our website at effinghamcountychamber.com. We update that multiple times a week and always with the latest information. So a lot of the things, there's a special section, as we mentioned, the paycheck protection for you. So always check that. And information is very fluid, as Matt and Mel alluded to. So always checking for SBA and other websites for the most recent updates. So the webinar today was recorded and will be available tomorrow in the Chamber's Business Advocate email newsletter and also on the Chamber's YouTube channel. You'll also be receiving an evaluation form about this webinar. So please complete that and send it back to us. It always is very helpful to us to have that information as we plan future webinars. So we do have a couple of upcoming webinars that we want to remind you about this afternoon at 2 o'clock. We're co-hosting a webinar with the Illinois Chamber on some state issues related to COVID and other just state issues. Matt referred to the progressive income tax that's going to be on the election ballot in November. We're going to be talking about that. Going to be talking about minimum wage, regulatory relief, and other pertinent topics for businesses. So join us this afternoon at 2 for that webinar. Some of you have joined us for our series of community conversations to keep Effingham County safe. We have 2 more sessions coming up on September 4th and 11th. You can find registration information on all of those programs on the events section of the website. We've also created a Facebook group on this topic, and so we certainly invite you to join that through the Chamber's Facebook page. Our next Chamber-sponsored webinar is Thursday, September 10th. Kind of continuing on today's theme related to the Families First Act that kind of mentioned at the end. Scott Cruz from Greensfelder Incorporated, a labor law attorney who has given several webinars for us. Before, he did a great webinar for our HR Roundtable group about a month ago, covering a lot of the Families First topics, which are very important right now as we deal with people in our businesses who are quarantined or isolated at home, either for their own health or for family members' health. So you'll want to know about that. And also, as we referred to, a lot of issues related to unemployment insurance. So Scott will be covering those. He's very well informed and does a great job. So with that, thank you again for joining us. We hope you'll join us in future conversations. Thank you.
Yep. Thank you, Norma. Thanks, Mel. Those healthcare workers are excluded. I put that out there, whoever was asking that question. Yeah, and just let us know other questions you have. Thanks, Norma, for leading this.